It started in a flash. Sirens blared. Cities darkened and fire lit up the night sky. What once felt like a distant threat was a brutal reality. A new war with deadlier weapons and higher stakes. This isn't just about rockets or drones anymore. It's a test of how far each side will push, and who has the will to stop it. Iran has just launched its largest ever direct strike against Israel, firing over 200 weapons from its territory within just 2 hours. The Iranian military launched more than 120 ballistic missiles and 70 armed drones in a massive proxy action. Not a warning and not a symbolic gesture. It was a bold, calculated move aimed at Israel's heartland, marking a dangerous turning point in Middle East warfare. The attack was carefully planned and executed with military precision. All missiles and drones were launched nearly simultaneously, in waves overwhelming Israeli defense systems. This was the first time Iran openly used its ballistic arsenal at this scale against Israeli soil, according to defense analysts. The operation showed both size and coordination with drones and missiles aimed at key infrastructure across the country. This event has been the most serious escalation between the two countries in decades. It shows Iran is no longer hiding behind regional militias. Instead, it's stepping forward to lead in a direct, open conflict. The actual shock came from the scale and where these missiles landed. The missile attack started at exactly 10:40 p.m. local time, and within minutes, sirens echoed across Israel's biggest cities. Tel Aviv, Haifa, Ramatan, and Ashdod were hit in waves. As missiles and drones approached in a highly organized pattern, the sky lit up with interception attempts. But not all incoming threats were stopped. This time, Israel's central air defense systems, Iron Dome, David Sling, and Route 3 were all activated, each designed to protect against different types of missiles. But the sheer number of incoming projectiles pushed them to their limits. More than 190 threats came in almost immediately, and many were launched from different directions to confuse radar systems and overload. Interception units' military observers noted the rare level of synchronization in the attack. Unlike past rocket salvos, this was a battlefield-level assault aimed at key urban centers, not border towns. The goal was clear challenge, Israel's defense shield at its core in the middle of the night. Ordinary citizens found themselves sheltering under alarms, while cities braced for impact. But as some missiles made it through, the damage they caused revealed how vulnerable even a high-tech defense can be. While Israel's air defense worked hard to stop the attack, several missiles got through and struck primary targets in Haifa. A powerful explosion hit the port area, causing a massive fire after destroying a fuel tank. Thick smoke covered the sky as firefighters rushed to control the blaze. 3 missiles landed inside the facility at Ramat David Air Base, one of the key military hubs. Hangars and supply lines were damaged, creating serious problems for future air operations. This was one of the most direct hits on an Israeli base in recent memory, in Tel Aviv. 2 missiles managed to bypass the defense shield and hit civilian areas. Several buildings suffered structural damage, and emergency teams worked through the night to rescue trapped residents. The shock was felt not only on the ground but across the country. Analysts say these were not random strikes, but aimed at weakening Israel's logistics and military response. The attackers used data, timing, and coordination to increase the impact of each missile. The more serious threat was not just the damage, but the level of technology behind these weapons. Iran's attack showed that it now has more advanced and dangerous weapons than ever before. The missiles used were not just fast, they were smart. Iran launched Zof Hajar, Desalul, and Fateh 110 missiles, which can change direction during the final stage of flight. This makes them harder to shoot down, even with high-tech systems like Iron Dome or Arrow 3. These missiles travel at very high speeds and are guided by modern. Analysts believe Iran has invested years into refining this arsenal to penetrate layered air defenses. But before the missile storm, Iran deployed kamikaze drones, programmed to seek and damage key assets like radar units and launcher positions. In some cases, even Iron Dome batteries were temporarily knocked offline, paving the way for the missile wave that followed. This use of drones to disable defense grids ahead of a missile barrage wasn't improvised. It was strategic, well-rehearsed, and highly effective. It also signaled a turning point. Iran isn't testing anymore, it's deploying its most advanced technologies. As the assault continued, Israel encountered an unprecedented scenario, one it had never seen before. For the first time in years, its defensive shield was pushed past the brink. The sheer volume of threats, from suicide drones to ballistic missiles, overwhelmed the nation's multi-tiered air defense systems. Iron Dome, known for its precision against short-range projectiles, simply couldn't handle the overload. Defense experts noted that this entire operation was engineered to swamp Israel's intercept capability. By releasing more than 200 weapons in a short span, Iran forced Israeli command to make impossible choices, determine which targets to prioritize and which to let pass. Rather than intercept every threat, they had to choose between immediate dangers and those heading towards civilian areas. Other systems, like David's Sling and Arrow 3, also responded. But even they struggled. The saturation was unlike anything Israel had ever prepared for. Real-time decisions had to be made across the defense grid. Radar data was processed in seconds, batteries synchronized on the fly, yet some threats still slipped through. No matter how sophisticated the systems are, volume and perfect timing can expose limits. And that's what happened. Iran demonstrated that even top-tier defenses could be destabilized by enough force and coordination. But the consequences weren't only military. As the missiles rained down and defense lines buckled, the real impact hit civilians. The human toll was immediate. 11 people were confirmed dead, and over 150 wounded, many critically. Emergency rooms in Haifa and Tel Aviv quickly shifted to full crisis mode to manage the sudden influx. The aftermath disrupted daily routines across several cities. Fires broke out in numerous locations, especially near the port of Haifa, where a direct missile strike on a fuel tank triggered a giant explosion. Nearby districts plunged into darkness as power lines were severed by the blast. In Tel Aviv, public transit, including sections of the underground metro, was halted, both due to damage and safety protocols. The ripple effect from the brief but intense attack was undeniable. A single night of violence was enough to rattle a highly developed nation. Roads were closed, rescue units were mobilized around the clock, and civilians were ordered to shelter in place. The next day, schools remained closed, and offices stayed shut as a precaution. For many, this wasn't just another national crisis. It was deeply personal. It reminded everyone that war doesn't stay on battlefields. It breaks into homes, hospitals, and everyday life. As the dust settled, Israeli leadership stood at a crossroads. While many braced for immediate retaliation, there was no instant counterstrike. Instead of firing back, Israel's leadership turned to diplomatic channels, looking toward Washington for coordination. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu labeled the assault a blatant act of war, yet no response was launched that night. Behind closed doors, talks intensified as Israel aimed for a more calculated, united front with its key ally, the United States. Meanwhile, criticism grew. Opposition leaders and military analysts blamed Netanyahu's previous decisions, especially air raids in Syria and near Iranian territory, for provoking this escalation. Protests began to swell, with angry citizens demanding answers and better protection. The pressure on the government was mounting, both from within and abroad, and the question remained: how long would Israel wait, and what would come next? Patrolled the skies, and defense systems stayed alert, ready for any follow-up attack. For now, though, Israel chose restraint. Silence became its tactic. This pause wasn't hesitation, it was a calculated move to avoid rushing into a broader war and to allow time to coordinate a joint strategy with its most powerful ally. But while Israel paused, the region didn't. The real threat might lie not in what just happened, but in what could come next. While Israel remained on standby, movements rippled across the Middle East. Iran's staunchest allies began to mobilize. Hezbollah, the heavily armed group operating out of Lebanon, raised its readiness level and issued warnings of potential involvement if Israel were to respond with force. At the same time, pro-Iran militias in Iraq, Syria, and Yemen began regrouping, assembling fighters and reinforcing strategic locations, sending a message that any retaliation might trigger a much broader confrontation. Meanwhile, in Washington, the U.S. reacted swiftly. The White House publicly reaffirmed its unwavering support for Israel, while officials considered deploying additional air defense resources to the eastern Mediterranean. American naval forces in the region were placed on heightened alert, signaling that the U.S. viewed the situation as more than just a localized skirmish. For Washington, this wasn't only about standing with Israel, it was also about sending a firm warning to Iran and its regional partners that escalation wouldn't be tolerated. Globally, other nations also weighed in. Turkey and Qatar called for emergency diplomatic engagement to help reduce tension. Russia and China urged a United Nations Security Council session to address the rising instability. Yet, despite all the diplomacy and statements, no unified resolution emerged. The situation had clearly shifted. This was no longer confined to a single flashpoint. Iran had made it clear. It's willing to launch direct strikes. And that fact raised a much larger concern. This was more than just a military operation. It was a statement. Iran's boldness signaled a willingness to confront adversaries head-on. The Middle East may be entering a new, volatile chapter. And what happens next could reshape the region's future.